هذه الحلقة برعاية خدمات التدريب المقدمة من المدربة ومقيم الجودة المعتمد سارة العلي. من خلال برنامج مهارات القهوة يمكنكم الحصول على شهادة معتمدة من جمعية القهوة المختصة العالمية في عدة دورات، منها مهارات الباريستا، مهارات تحضير القهوة اليدوية أو المقطرة، ومهارات العلوم الحسية. لمزيد من المعلومات يمكنكم الاطلاع على التفاصيل في أسفل الحلقة.
Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward Friends. Sara Alali, the host of our Middle East podcast, is joining me for the final episode of our Swapcast. Welcome back, Sara.
Hello, Lee.
This is my favorite episode of our series. And also, this is the final episode of the podcast for 2022 for my podcast. Yours is obviously going to continue happening. But after this episode, we're going to be doing encore series of the most listened to series throughout this year. We're going to run them for the rest of the year and the first half of January next year. So this is kind of exciting that this is our last podcast for the year. I wouldn't have done it with anybody other than you.
Thank you. It's an honor.
The honor is all mine. This has been a really interesting year for both of us, particularly working on that. So the question I have for you is, what would you have done differently?
Oh, okay. So the first thing I would work more on learning about what's happening economically, socially around me, and be more informed about them. Not just on the local community, even globally. So also I might also think of reading more about economics, about politics, about the coffee industry, the hospitality industry, more education, let's say.
Yep.
And I would have started this earlier.
Yep.
Than focusing just on coffee, because coffee is not just coffee. It's like everything. It's economy, it's politics, it's everything. So you need to be well informed in these different subjects. And maybe this is something that I'm trying to work on now. And the podcast, like the Map It Forward podcast, helped me a lot to giving me like the key words to search for and what I should learn more about the world. It's not just coffee.
Thank you for saying that. The reason I'm laughing is because I'm remembering the number of times that I would say to you, Sara, we've got to have a conversation about inflation. And I could see like you roll your eyes going, Lee, is this really going to be relevant? Or I would say to you, we need to talk about the war in Ukraine. Or we need to talk. Do you remember how many times you'd be like,
I just want to open my business. I want to open my door.
Lee, I just want to open a cafe. I don't really need to understand what's going to happen with the economy, and I don't need to understand this, and I don't need to understand that. And I would say to you, but Sara, you need to understand, because in Ukraine, the price of fertilizers is going to impact the price of roasted of green coffee, and et cetera, et cetera. It was really wonderful to watch you go from somebody who didn't think that that stuff was important to then coming to our coaching session saying, okay, so I heard about this, that you talked about this on the podcast. Tell me more. It was, you started to, like, I watched you grow up as a business owner into the point where you started to realize like, okay, so Lee, I need to have conversations with my suppliers about how they're preparing for inflation and how they're preparing for shortages. What are we going to do? And it was really wonderful for me to see you go from somebody who didn't think that this was important to somebody who realized things might have been different if I was more informed earlier. And now we've got to get onto this. It was really, really wonderful. So thanks for the compliment of bearing with me while I whipped you into shape about that.
Yeah, because these things are not easy to digest. Why? And sometimes it's boring, right? The economics and the politics, right? I don't think
100%.
like it's
100%.
nice to know about it, but it's sometimes like very difficult to digest, and it gets to the point where you don't understand anything, so it's boring.
Yeah.
And it's too much like information. Like, what should I do? Like, learn about coffee and the terminology, because politics is another language, economics is another language.
Yeah,
so
100%.
you have to learn it, and this is what I would have done differently.
But that's why you get a coach, right? Or you get a consultant that's working with you on a monthly basis, because it's my job to be informed about as much as I can be informed about. And I work in 7 different countries. I have to learn the geopolitics of what's going to be impacting those 7 countries so that I can inform my clients.
Yeah.
But like, I want to be very clear. This stuff used to break my brain when I wasn't a consultant and I was just running my own business. I didn't have the capacity. When I was running Elixir Specialty Coffee, I did not have the capacity to do that and understand geopolitics. It was just too much. Yeah. But now it's my job to understand that stuff. So, yeah. What else would you have done differently?
The other thing is that I would have given myself more time to experience what is it like to be not only a barista, but running a cafe. And like, I might have been in a cafe for like 2 years, working in a cafe for 2 years as a manager or a head barista, to learn more. How is it like to be a head barista? How is it like to be a manager in a cafe? What does it involve?
Which is also difficult for you in an emerging market, right? Like anyone you're going to go and work for, because you are the example right now. You are one of the leading places to set the example for how cafes should be run in Saudi. But you had to figure that out from your own experience. The cafes that have established around you were also learning on the go. So I'm gonna cut you some slack there. The only way you could have done that is to get outside of Saudi and learn it somewhere else. So maybe that's something you could have done, is go and be a barista in another country, maybe, or run cafes in other countries. What else would you have done different?
Like with my circumstances, I can't.
You're a mother.
Like,
you can't.
It's very difficult. I can't just go and stay for 2 years outside and
no,
be a barista.
What else would you have done differently?
I will be wiser in my connections, like building connections and the people I want to be around me, and the support system, which I said is a tip that you have to build a support system. And maybe I would start coaching. Like, you need someone to be your mentor early, like not just because you want to open a business, but everyone needs a coach, a mentor, someone in their life that will give support and will challenge them and direct them to the blind spots.
Yep. And I want to add something there. Given this is a Swapcast, I'm going to add my own little what would I have done differently. And what I think that people should think about as well, doing differently, is be very, very careful who you choose to go on this ride with. You know, leaning on that coaching thing that you're talking about. Make sure that the people that are going on this ride with you, you're choosing them for the right reasons. If you're choosing someone just because of the money they have, it's not a good reason to choose someone. Whether it's someone who's going to be a silent investor, whether it's someone who's going to be an active investor. A lot of the time, when you're someone like Sara, or you're someone that's very well recognized that's doing something, a lot of the time, I have seen this again and again and again with people who I have coached. They choose people to go into business with because of who they are rather than all the other reasons you should be choosing to be in business. So choose your people very, very carefully. I definitely would have chosen some of my people differently, but I got lucky along the way as well in choosing the right people at the right time. Yeah. So when it comes to the pandemic, looking back at it, what do you think you could have done differently given there were external forces that were putting pressure on you?
It's hard to say this, but I would say I would never open the business.
Yeah.
It's not just, it's not that I'm, what is the word, like trying to
discourage
people, but I would have stayed as a pop-up and managed the pop-up. And there are great opportunities now for pop-ups.
Yep.
With all what's happening in Saudi, like Riyadh season and other things, they need pop-ups. So maybe I could have just stayed in the same business model as a pop-up and scale it up as a pop-up.
Right. So maybe open a second pop-up?
Exactly. And offering this business, this service. It's, honestly, this is the thing that I would have done differently. And it's the most difficult part
thing to admit.
is that I will just decide not to open the cafe.
The burden at the time that you did it, like I got to tell you, as somebody who was there with you every day, and we were literally talking every day, most of what didn't go your way had nothing to do with you. Like you opened at perhaps the most difficult time in the history of cafes to open a cafe in a city that was emerging as a new market where the supply chain was falling over left, right, and center. And you're expected to take the next leap in your journey, which would have gone very differently if there wasn't a pandemic and there wasn't all of this economic stuff going on around you. Like you're trying to open a luxury cafe at a time where consumers across the board, the rich people as well as the middle class, are all experiencing price sensitivity.
Yeah.
You could never have predicted any of this. And it's fine to say, like looking back, this is what I could have done. But even back then, looking forward, there was no way that any of us could have thought that this was going to be as hard as it was.
Yeah.
And I would encourage anybody that is resonating with what Sara's saying, please go easy on yourself. This has been a really tough few years for everybody in this industry. And I would say that the toughest years are still ahead of us for this industry. Get comfortable with the discomfort of what's coming. We're really at the beginning of this economic stuff, whatever it is. I call it a tsunami. We're really at the beginning of understanding what's going to happen. Be kind to yourself. You'll know when it's time to close your cafe. You'll know when it's time to downscale. You'll know when it's time to make some hard decisions. Just trust yourself. I have been in awe of Sara, watching her as she had to make really difficult decisions. Because the things that she wanted to do with the cafe and the directions she wanted to go and the signals she was being sent by her consumers required Sara to make some very difficult choices about the direction that the business was going in. She had to adapt. And that was really hard for you, right, Sara?
Yeah.
But this kind of ties in together, like all the things we didn't like we learnt about ourselves and all the things that we would do differently, and the challenges we expected and we didn't expect. This has been a wild ride the last few years, not just with this business, but with the pandemic and with the economic situation that we're in. And you have navigated this like a champ. You really, really have navigated it like a champ. You should, and everything did not go your way. Most things did not go your way, and you couldn't have anticipated it, and I couldn't be prouder of you. I really couldn't.
It's not only on the professional level, even on personal level.
Yeah.
Things were going wrong, and I'm having obstacles on both levels.
All levels.
All levels, yeah. And from different sides, and like where should I fight from? And it's like you're having punches coming to you from different people, from different places, and you don't know where to look and where you should be focused on, and where you should start punching back, or or protecting yourself from which side. So it was really difficult, and I think it's part of the journey.
100%.
Maybe if we were in a different period of time or different, it will present with its own challenges.
100%. I have a question.
We can't say it's gonna be wow. Yeah.
Did you know it was going to be this hard?
On me, no. I know it's hard as efforts, time, everything, but I didn't know it's gonna hit me hard as Sara, personally, deep in my soul. So this is the thing that I never expected.
I'm going to ask you the question that I hate people asking me, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Ask me.
Would you do it again?
No.
Yeah. And I always answer the same thing as what you just said. People say to me, oh, but Lee, look at the really amazing life that you've led and the rich experiences that you've had. And you've been in the music industry, and you've been in the coffee industry, and you've drag raced cars, and you've done this and you've done that. Look at what it's turned you into. It didn't have to be as hard as it was.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I would change. The obstacles definitely teach you what you're made of. It brings you to the brink of everything you thought you were capable of, and then takes you far beyond that. And it's too often you're left thinking, I don't think I can survive this. That's not...
You remind me of, I had a conversation with one of my friends, and he was, wallah, he got it right. He's trying to explain or describe the journey of entrepreneur. And he was saying, when you're in the moving sands?
Yes.
Like the desert. And he say it's like you are, constantly trying to get up and get on top of the sand, and it keeps dragging collapsing you down. And and this is the constant state of just fighting. And, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Because you're there, in the middle of the desert, and the sands are moving. You either gonna drown, or you have to keep, pushing,
surviving,
and surviving. So, and it's not like you just say, okay, I'm gonna rest for 2 weeks and then I'll get back. No.
And this is why people say to me, but are you saying that people shouldn't be entrepreneurs? People shouldn't open businesses? No. You should do it. When I say that this journey is going to teach you everything you never wanted to know about yourself, the second part of that statement is, if you can cultivate enough grit to get comfortable with how uncomfortable this is going to be, you should do it anyway. But from what I've learnt in my journey, the thing that I would change is I would have people around me that would champion me and support me in ways that I needed. Like, that's what I have now. I have a small handful of people around the world that I can pick up the phone and I can say, this shit is really hard today. And they can say, you know what? I know what that feels like. Talk to me. There's this culture out there in this hustle culture kind of environment, a lot of the time, if you don't have the right support network, where people are just like, get over it. Like, this is just what entrepreneurs' life is. We've got to get more supportive of each other. We've got to be there for each other. And that's what's exciting me about the things that are shifting. And the things that I'm hearing from people who are listening to this podcast is like, hey, I want to conspire to the success of other people. And I want people to conspire to my success. And the big vision for Map It Forward, as you and I both know, being a part of Map It Forward, is we want to create an industry that builds responsible businesses that have responsible pricing models. That is like my dream come true, because then we have a business and an industry that can sustain itself. In order for that to happen, we've got to have people working together.
Yeah.
We will get there one day.
Definitely. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Sara, thank you very much. Thank you for being my last guest on my podcast, and thank you for having me on your podcast. It's an honor. If people want to find you, where can they find you on social media?
On Instagram.
Instagram's the best place?
We will have them in the notes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And just from me, everyone, I just want to thank you for the support that you've given Map It Forward this week. This has been our best year yet. We have now got 50,000 people a month that listen to this podcast, which is, at the end of last year, it was 20,000. So, I mean, that's a huge increase in 1 year. And I'm honored that you listen to this podcast and that you are so engaged with the content, although we don't hear from a lot of people very much, but that's the nature of podcasts. Next year, our content theme is going to be about understanding the coffee consumer. And so what you can look forward to is having guests on the podcast that are going to talk about the coffee consumer, but we're also going to bring producers on the podcast a lot more next year so that we can kind of connect that gap between the consumer and the producer and figure out how they can be brought together closer in the supply chain. So we have some ideas of how that could happen, and we're going to explore that next year on the podcast.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. Sara, good luck with the rest of this year with your podcast. Everyone tune in for the on-care episodes. And Sara, can you sign off this series for us?
Peace, love, and peanut butter.
Have an amazing rest of your day, everyone. Bye.
Bye. أعزائي، شكرا لمتابعتكم وحسن استماعكم. إن شاء الله تكونوا استفدتوا واستمتعتوا بحلقتنا، ونتمنى أنكم تكونوا جزء من مجتمع Map It Forward. إذا حابين تنضموا لنا ادعمونا على صفحتنا في منصة patreon.com/mapitforward.